This is Weirdly Enough, your regular podcast for strange stories and amazing facts, delivered straight to your favorite podcast directory and at weirdlyenough.com. Now, here are your hosts, Andy and Len.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of the Weirdly Enough podcast. I'm Andy Kane. I'm joined with Len Johnson. Hello, how are you?
Not too bad.
Do remember you can like and subscribe to us on socials.
On the socials.
Yeah. Well, you subscribe through your podcast apps. So wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Weirdly Enough. I'm always surprised because there's all these new podcast directories and things coming out all the time, and I'm always surprised Weirdly Enough's always up there. So they share them and they're all around.
What all ones are we on?
Oh, I don't know. The list's too huge to mention, but it's all the main ones anyway. You can find us fairly easily. We're on what do you call it? Spotify. We're on Deezer. We're on.
Are we on Podomatic?
I don't know what Podomatic is, but I shall
Podomatic.
I've never heard of Podomatic. Is that?
I would listen to loads of stuff on Podomatic. I think we're on Spreaker.
Oh, of course we're on Spreaker. Yeah,
Spreaker.
Spreaker.
I would listen to loads of stuff on Spreaker. That's right. Good. We need to get on Podomatic and Spreaker here.
I imagine we're on it. I don't know. Podomatic, you have to download
I've got the app on my phone for Podomatic.
All right. Well, have you not searched for yourself on it then?
I did, but I couldn't find us.
Right. Okay.
We went on.
I assume they generally all share the information. So if we're on one, so I've downloaded Podomatic here.
It'd just be interesting to make sure we're on Podomatic and Spreaker.
You have to log in.
Oh, God.
Oh, for sign up. Not right now. No, I'm not gonna sign in.
You see, we may think we're wasting time in this podcast by doing this, but that's a sort of promotion.
Is it? Right.
Because we're saying, we've got hey kids, we've got this new platform.
There is a list somewhere of where we are, but yeah.
Because Spreaker's a big one. I would get loads of things on Spreaker and download them for my tippy tappy phone,
Yeah.
So I can listen to them on my various commutes. And when I'm down, in Asda or B&M Bargains or whatever, buying bleach.
We're on Podchaser.
Oh right, I've heard of Podchaser. Yeah.
We're on TuneIn. We're on Deezer.
Yes.
We're on Listen Notes.
Yes, I haven't heard of Listen Notes.
Stitcher.
We're on Stitcher.
We're on Stitcher. All right. iHeartRadio. That's not even available in the UK, but we're on that.
Okay.
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the big ones. But we're also on YouTube.
Yes, we're on YouTube. We haven't got many subscribers, so we've only got 17.
And we're on Podfriend, a friend in your bed.
Oh.
We used to do hospital radio.
A friend in your bed.
A friend in your bed. So there you are. We're on.
Do you know what? That's almost as creepy as. You see on Twitter, people always talk about sliding into your DMs.
Oh yeah.
It's very creepy though, doesn't it? Slide into your DMs.
I think it's supposed to be creepy.
All right.
Yeah.
Have you ever slid into anybody's DMs?
No, I think there's that song. Your boyfriend's in my DMs. I don't know what it is, but it's something about you better tell him to get out of my DMs. Yeah, something like that. And I think that's what it is, because he's starting to try and cheat over a DM, which is a direct message, I believe.
Oh, plus it was that day to be alive, but to be young was very heaven.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, brave new world.
DMs.
It has such people in it.
Imagine what it's going to be like in 20 years.
You see, that's all in 20 years' time will just be. I have a theory about this.
Yeah.
It'll go very virtual reality.
Yeah.
Now, I know people have been talking about virtual reality really since the 80s, but it's never really been a thing.
What's that augmented reality? Oh no, that's something different.
But you will be getting to a stage of it's going to happen, it's bound to happen. People will be more and more. There'll be. Because I definitely think, again, this is going to be a topic that I want to do in the future.
Yeah.
On the podcast of transhumanism.
Okay.
Which is a thing. It's not just like nerds talking about this on the internet. It's like there's also intellectual philosophers and thinkers talking about this being the next stage of human evolution.
Oh yeah.
Where you become, two things are going to happen. You'll be getting almost like bionic man. So you'll be extending your lifespan and health and whatnot. Say like you get a diggy ticker.
Yeah.
you have. I suppose you got pacemakers and stuff like that. That's
well,
already sort of gone about bionic. Like, you know?
Yeah, all those like triple and quadruple heart bypasses that would have been like really scary back in the day. I've been reading Bob Mortimer's autobiography about his bypass, and it seems to be pretty mundane now for the surgeons. Certainly not for the person undergoing it, but it seems to be pretty standard for the surgeons.
Well, there'd be two things at play here. You have that going on, but also the virtual reality I can't even pronounce it. So many words I can't pronounce. Augmented
reality.
Yeah, that word. Oh, how do you say that?
Augmented reality.
That's
I think
the one.
that is different to virtual reality in that with augmented reality you can make things appear in your world. So it's like this avatar.
Yeah.
They're augmented reality because they're not really there, but they're put into reality. You know, they're kind of augmented into reality. I think that's what's happening.
Well, you see, there's two things recently that got me thinking about this. There's a thing on Radio 4. This guy was talking about the virtual office.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you work from home in your little pod and your smart city apartment. You know, and we don't travel anymore because that's bad for the environment. You see, so we don't travel.
So just sit in these vast apartment blocks.
But my concern with working from home is the lack of social contact, but never fair, because in the brave new world, sort of post 2030, you'll be able to have like a virtual interaction. So you can have like a virtual coffee in your virtual tea room with your virtual chums. So, and we'll all have like, I mean, we could sit and never go outside our houses and do the podcast, but we'd be sitting here like little avatars of ourselves and drinking little virtual beers and stuff like that.
You wouldn't even need real people to virtually interact with, because there'd be, you know, computer friends in the future. Yeah.
Our friends electric.
Yes.
The ghost in the machine.
Indeed.
And the other thing they were talking about, the thing that came across, I forget the name of it, but there's some new game show. This is really freaky. I have to take it out. Sandy and Link or whatever. But it was a new thing in America where it's like all avatars. It's like a talent show,
right?
You know, like what do you call those musical ones? You know,
the voice and stuff.
Yeah,
you
like the voice.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, this one has our old friend will.i.am.
Oh, will.i.am pops up everywhere.
Our old chum will.i.am pops up like a bad penny. But will.i.am and other celebs are on this. And they're up a panel and they're judging the singers. It's all very bog standard. But what the difference is, it's all avatars.
Right.
So, but basically, I think the shtick is it's all these people that they lack confidence because they're too chubby, or they're too bald, or they're too old, or too saggy, or they're too giggly, or they're just cripping, horribly shy.
Yes.
They've all got great voices, but they can never put themselves forward because their lack of confidence, because they're not like conventionally. You know, some of them are fine looking, but it's in their own heads. They've got issues with confidence and whatnot. So the idea is they're all strapped up to these kind of, you know, these motion capture kind of things.
Yes,
you see, you know, these horrible, you know.
And what do the avatars look like? Are they kind of like
freaky
cartoons? Or,
they're like, do you know? Do you ever see a dreadful film? You know, Avatar.
Yes.
It's a horrible film. Just a waste.
Never seen it, but
you're not missing much. It's all nonsense, like. But you know, these kind of weird, kind of green, kind of purple.
Yeah, the blue kind people. Yeah,
I'll research this. I'll send you the link. It's absolutely freaky. But these avatars, you know, so it's like their voices, but it's like and the avatars.
Yeah.
So say you want to be better looking.
Okay, yeah.
Or if you want to swap gender or be like a different race, like you said, if you fancied being like a sassy black woman.
Okay, yeah. How do you know I'm not?
You could be a sassy black woman.
Okay.
You know, it's actually quite interesting, but it's again, this is what you're moving towards, this sort of virtual reality sort of thing. You know, interestingly.
We'll have to move on, but talking of game shows, have you heard about this thing on Netflix, Squid Game or Squid Game?
Yeah, it's a big thing now.
It sounds absolutely awful.
I think it sounds very interesting. It's you know, it's
I've
Korean,
heard
isn't it?
People that have watched that have said it's just terrible, the gore and violence and all. Oh, I don't know.
But this is what the masses want. It's like, you know, ancient Rome when the final days. That's what the masses like. They like violence. They like sex. They like death. They like sport. That's what the masses like.
The masses have all turned off because we've been talking for nearly 10 minutes. So today we're talking about Phantom Time. And did the Middle Ages ever happen? That's how I was explaining it to somebody who was asking me what the podcast is about today.
Well, here's the thing, right? What year is it?
2021, I think. Isn't it? Yeah.
Wrong. It's actually 1721.
Okay, right.
According to...
So we lost, what, 300 years?
Basically, the idea is it's the phantom time hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was first set out by a guy called Heribert Illig, which is a German guy. Now, he has been working on this idea since 1991. And basically, his concept is that the church, the medieval church, had a thing about the millennium. They were obsessed with the millennium.
Right, yeah.
So their millennium was the year 1000.
Uh-huh.
So what they did was they basically forged dates. And it was done in cahoots with the Holy Roman Emperor at the time.
Okay.
And the Byzantine Emperor and all the sort of guys.
Back in what? In the 600s or something?
Basically the medieval times. Basically, they decided that... Now, there's zero evidence, obviously, to back this up.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But basically, Pope Sylvester II, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, and Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII.
Mm.
And they were obsessed with this idea of the millennium, the year 1000. So they thought it would be really exciting to see if they reigned during the year 1000. But now, this was actually the year 703.
Okay.
So this is quite head-melting when you think about it, but try and remember these dates. So this is the year 703, so this is the Dark Ages. Mm-hmm. So they're sitting there thinking, oh, it'd be great to... Because at the time, they were trying to, like, revive the Roman Empire and try and claim all that kind of glory. And also, there's this whole thing of... It was about, like... Do you remember the way people were obsessed with the year 2000?
Yes. Uh-huh.
There was a similar thing going on.
Okay.
And they run up to the year 1000. And there was two kind of schools of thought. There was one school that thought it's the end of the world, it's going to be apocalyptic. Then other people thought basically Jesus would come back and it would be a glorious time. And it was the year, all these sort of people were looking at the Bible and thinking, making calculations and thinking it's all going to kick off in 1000. So these guys, to seize the glory, thought, well, why don't we just say it's the year 1000?
Yeah.
Because how would people know?
Fast forward.
Because everyone's like, they're like ignorant peasants. They don't actually know where they are. So we'll just say it's 1000.
One thing I was going to say is that you were saying at the start, there's no evidence to support that this actually happened. But, and I was going to say, well, is there not evidence that could disprove it? Like, things have been found, relics and things from those years. But if you think back, there's a lot of relics kind of from the last 1,000 years up to now. So Viking stuff, Norman stuff, stuff like that. And there's relics going back to biblical times, like the Turin's Shroud and those kind of relics. There isn't really anything from 600 to 900, maybe.
And historians will often talk about this being the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And it's like this big gap in history. You say this, to my mind, it sort of almost ties in with the whole idea of Tartaria.
Okay,
this idea, the timeline's been messed about.
What was the Tartaria one about?
That was the weird... That was this idea that every few hundred years...
Oh, the mud flood.
Civilization is reset by a mud flood. And it's like the Tartarians say, whenever you go around towns and you've got all the sort of neo-classical architecture, like the City Hall.
Yes.
They'd look at the City Hall and say, oh, it's a Tartarian temple. And they're all obsessed with like free energy, and they probably look at that and think, oh, it's for generating like free energy or whatever, from the ley lines and whatnot,
Back to the old ley lines again.
But basically, they reckon that the Pope and the two emperors were padding out and basically making up kind of history. And Illig and his supporters claim that there's no evidence of anything actually existing between, as you say, between the year 614 and the year 911. There's nothing can actually be solidly dated, so it ties into what you're saying about there's no evidence. And he also points out there's what they call Romanesque architecture in Europe, which existed as late as the 10th century. So he thinks that the Roman Empire fell a lot more recently than was thought. So his idea was we basically moved from like Roman Empire to Renaissance.
Okay. And
that the Dark Ages and medieval times were just completely made up.
Yeah.
So that's this idea that by his reckoning it should be the 8th century right now.
What about the Vikings and people like that, though?
Well, I suppose you could maybe argue that those guys lived out in the fringes of Europe.
Yeah.
So they were kind of barbaric.
Yeah.
So that would kind of tie in kind of okay with the fairy, like, you know. Now, another thing he uses is there's no documentation, or very little documentation, on the expansion of Islam throughout Europe at the time, and also there's not many references to Jewish peoples, what they were doing at this time. Right. It sort of goes straight from the biblical times to kind of more modern times. So there's no kind of, there's like again this kind of idea of this break in the timeline, you know. By connecting all the dots, now he says it becomes kind of 297 years are missing from the histories of many cultures and civilizations. There's a quote here. He says, "Nobody looks over the whole situation, and therefore nobody is astonished that the same structural problems occur in different disciplines." So it's a very interesting kind of idea.
What about things like carbon dating? Could you not get something
they
know is 2,000 years old?
They say that they can't find stuff from that time.
Well, what about getting something that is supposed to have been around in biblical times and trying to date it to 2,000 years?
That'd be an interesting way to do that, actually. Yeah, that could work. It came up in pop culture in November 2013 during the 50th anniversary of Kennedy's assassination. There's a thing called the BS Report podcast, and here a sports and pop culture writer, Bill Simmons, had writer Chuck Klosterman and former MTV writer and news guy Chris Conley on to discuss the conspiracy theories surrounding JFK's death. And one of the theories that Klosterman brought up, and it was indirectly related to JFK, was the phantom time hypothesis. He said that there are 300 years that some scholars believe are unaccounted for. He attributed it to kings, emperors, rulers, adding years to their reigns so that they lasted longer when history looked back. Because if you look at that period of time, there's always guys that are mentioned, and there's like no evidence about what they did.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I sort of was one, you know, when you ever just fall down rabbit holes on Wikipedia or whatever. So one night I came back from a night out and I was a bit bored, so I thought, for some reason there's some report about the royals and about ancestry. On TV, so I thought, oh, it'd be interesting to see how, you know, look at the line of succession. And there's weird kind of, it only goes back so far. And then it just disappears into the mist of history.
Because there were kind of kingdoms and stuff throughout. And there wasn't just one king, one ruler.
And you see, you look into history, and the more and more you look into it, there's strange kind of gaps and mysterious things all the time. It's like the pigs. You know, the pigs are strange people. Like, you say, because I remember going with you to Scotland one time, we went for a drive, and once you get up past Dundee, you're sort of getting more towards, I suppose, North East Scotland. And you're getting into, I remember seeing a sign that was like, oh, you're entering Pigland. Right. Pigs used to live, like, you know. But the weird thing is, nobody knows anything about the pigs. They don't know much about their culture, or their language, or where they came from, or what really happened to them. But they just dominated this whole area of Scotland for hundreds of years, you know.
And what was it, the Vikings got rid of them, or how did they disappear?
Well, they blended in with different people, because in Scotland, the Scoti came over, who were basically like a Gaelic tribe from Ireland, and they sort of fought with the Picts for a while, and then sort of intermarried with them, and then you had like the Vikings and Anglo-Saxons and stuff coming in as well. Right. So it's just one of these kind of weird things. I mean, and again, funnily enough, that pops up in the Dark Ages sort of time. Now, it's not just this guy, the German guy Illig, that's into this. There's another guy called Anatoly Fomenko. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I haven't. No.
He's a Russian mathematician.
That
became fascinated by this, and he developed a theory called the New Chronology.
Yes.
And he basically thinks that pre-Renaissance history was fabricated, again, most of the time, the behest of the church at the time, and basically a lot of things that they say they basically happen in different places. Like, for example, here's a theory that the Babylonian captivity described in the Bible, in which the Jews of the kingdom of Judah were invaded by Babylon and held captive there for 70 years in the 6th century BC, is actually a false history, and it was actually inspired by the 70-year Avignon papacy period, in which 7 popes resided in Avignon in France, as opposed to Rome due to pressure from the French monarchy. So he thinks different things happen in different places at different times, and we're kind of mixed up. And in Russia, and he thinks as well that the Russians have they take a bigger part in the history than normally would be acknowledged. And in Russia, it's tied in with, there's always sort of, on the more nationalistic side, people would be very into this and random people like Gary Kasparov, the chess player. He's obsessed by this. He thinks this is the new thing. This is how you explain everywhere. Now, there's an English edition of his book that was published in 2003 under the title History, Fiction or Science. So basically, you can get into that. I think you can get it on Amazon, and it basically explains that how the whole thing works. He says British history in particular is completely broken and kind of mixed up, and he says that basically from the Roman occupation to William the Conqueror is completely, the dates are all wrong and it's all kind of confused. And he says that the Roman Empire actually began at the 9th century, and its eastern half, which is the Byzantine Empire, was actually the true centre of it. Okay. So it's very interesting, and again, it's one of these topics that I think, to be honest, you could do a whole series on it. It's very. I was a wee bit nervous about doing this because, see, to be honest, it's very complicated. It's very dense. That's only a very kind of quick overview of the whole thing, but it's just. That's
really interesting. Yeah, I think I'm going to go and dig into it and find out a bit more. Well, that's great. Thanks for covering that. We'll be back with our weird shorts just after this. Oh, do you know what I really hate? You know what? When you're declared officially dead, there's so much paperwork and faff to go into to get this decision reversed, isn't there?
It is, yeah.
That's what happened to a French woman, Jeannie Pouchain, she's called. She's from the Loire Valley region. Apparently it all came out after a blunder made during a legal hearing into an employment issue, and Pouchain says that she no longer exists, calling the situation macabre. It reminds me of the old Reason Murder song about being trapped in your flat after the council presumed the protagonist had died. Do you remember that? Trapped in my flat.
I do remember that one.
Oh, I love Trapped in My Flat. You should look that up. And we mentioned last week about that fellow in Turkey who ended up joining his own search party following a heavy drinking session. We've all done things like that we regret, but one Birmingham man has ended up... One Birmingham man has ended up doing something rather silly when drunk, and suddenly it's all come back to him. This is Thomas Dodd. He changed his name to Celine Dion.
Right.
After a few too many libations and after watching a concert by the Quebec singer. Celine Dion, as we'll call him from now on, has decided not to rush into changing his name back, however, after he received the certificate in the post a few days after Christmas last year. Apparently, he also paid a fee of £89 online. So he's going to...
How did they change his name?
Online, you can do it. You just fill out a form, apparently, send off the money, and probably just put in your credit card details. But presumably
it's not legal, because I mean, you're not like properly changing.
Oh, it is. It's done by Dupol. That's it. Yeah, that's how easy it is. By the looks of it.
That seems a bit too easy to do.
He did it some night. Yeah. Strange.
So now he's legally Celine Dion.
Yeah. They really need to look at that law, you know? And Utah is suffering from extreme drought at the moment, and it's ended up exposing a ghost town lost after the federal government built a dam in 1957, which now impounds the Rockport Lake. Back in the 50s, the area was home to 27 families, totaling about 200 people. The area was first settled in the 1860s. The extremely low water has exposed the foundation of the town for the first time in 64 years, and a drone pilot has taken pictures of the area, which reveals remnants of roads and houses. If you look at our Facebook, I've put a link to the YouTube video there. This year also saw the uncovering of a town in the Italian Alps called Carzon. which was submerged also in the 1950s. Eerie photos of that show that the church bell tower sticking out of the water. It's quite an eerie one to see. Anyway, thanks very much for listening. Do subscribe, give us a review if you've enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear from you as well. You can email podcast@weirdlyenough.com. Talk to you next week, folks. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Weirdly Enough. Remember to subscribe to get the latest edition as soon as it drops. And don't forget to leave a review. Email us about anything we've discussed or with your own weird tale at podcast@weirdlyenough.com.